looking out at the audience and seeing so many familiar faces, just thinking to myself that 40 years can go by, yet some events seem just as clear as if they had happened yesterday. And what I wanted to say was that for me, the most exciting thing that's happened in my career has been working on the design and specification of TCP as a graduate student. I came here from India in September of 1972. And I think many of you know that Palo Alto, Stanford, Silicon Valley, and the greater Bay Area was a very different place. One might actually think of it as sleepy compared to what it is today. Yet, there's an incredible hotbed of innovation going on. Now, my fellow graduate students were busy trying to figure out how to put more transistors onto a chip or figure out how to really build multiprocessors, all the stuff that we now take for granted today. But I was fascinated by this thing that we called, in those days, that was called the ARPANET. And when you look back, I was living the future. I was sending emails, I was FTPing files, I was chatting with all kinds of other people that were connected to the ARPANET. So what we think of today as the World Wide Web really existed in a slightly different form that fostered collaboration way back in 1973. Now, one of my fondest memories is what I call the Alexander Graham Bell moment, when the TCP implementation that we were doing at Stanford on a PDP-11. I'm sure there are some of you in the audience who still remember what a PDP-11 was. It was the mini computer that was the hottest piece of equipment that you could get in those days. The Computer History Museum certainly has some of those. Was communicating with the TCP built at BBN on a PDP-10 running 10x. Now, 10x in those days was a state-of-the-art operating system. It was the best thing you could possibly get. And so when that happened, we were all jumping for joy because we'd spend many sleepless nights and, of course, days programming TCP in a programming language called BCPL. And I think some of you have used that language. It was a precursor to C. So when you go back and look at what happened in those days, it was a different environment, but the innovation that was taking place was still as hot as it is today. Now, after that particular experiment, we discovered that there were a couple of things in TCP that weren't working right, and so we went back to work and tried to create a more robust version of TCP. And so in the sort of November, December of 1974, I was busily typing from handwritten notes, drafts by Vint, Carl Sunshine, and myself, racing to get the spec done by the end of the year. And again, for those of you who remember, I was using a state-of-the-art TI Silent 700 thermal printer terminal. So this was awesome because, instead of having dot matrix, you could just get these pages flying out of your terminal with various drafts. And again, going back into the past, I was using what Doug Engelbart and his group at SRI, there's many of you here, were building, which was then called NLS for online system, using the word processor and hierarchical editing system. So you just have to go back and realize that, for me at least, this was sort of a most unique experience in my life that has certainly impacted what I've done since then. Now, later on, after getting my PhD from Stanford, I went over to Xerox, and that's where my eyes got opened up because there were Altos there and there were Ethernets, and what we thought of as internetworking was going to happen at a very different scale. And I know John Schock is going to give you some of his perspectives of what happened in those days, but in 1978, we persuaded Vint and then the larger TCP community that was growing that they should take TCP and split it into TCP and IP. And that's why today it's called TCP over IP. So just in my final comments are that I met Vint in January of 1973. Vint was teaching a class on systems programming, and I didn't know anything about systems programming, and I was sort of busy learning all this stuff. And I went up to him after that and said that I was quite fascinated by the work that he was doing on networking in general, especially derivatives from the ARPANET. And that particular encounter really has changed the arc of my life. And it's something that I treasure very much because it's really, helped define who I am today, and I had no idea when I came in '72 that any of this stuff was possible. And TCP/IP really, at the end of the day, I think of it as the internal combustion engine of the information age. It's in every single device in order to make this worldwide connectivity happen, whether it's on a wearable computer or an embedded machine or the iPhone or Android device that you're carrying with you. So thank you, Vint.
Thank you, Vin.